Let me ask you something. Have you ever stayed with someone not because they were right for you, but because a part of you was scared that no one else would ever come along? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, this is probably as good as it gets for me now, or I better hold on to this person because who else is going to accept me? I know I have. I mean, let's face it. When most people are told they have herpes, something changes in the way that they see themselves. They start believing that their dating pool just got a whole lot smaller and that they have to lower their standards and that wanting more might cost them the little that they think they have left. And that way of thinking has you settling for less without you even realizing it. But here's the truth. You were never out of options to begin with. You just started believing that you were. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how that belief takes hold, how it affects your dating life without you even realizing it, and what changes the moment you stop choosing from fear and start choosing from what you actually want and deserve. Hi, I'm Dupree, and I help people to navigate life with herpes. And if any of what I just said hit a nerve, I want you to stick with me because what I described has a name for it. And once you hear it, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. But before I reveal what that is, I just want to let you know that after I was diagnosed, I convinced myself that the only people who would ever want to be with me were people who also had herpes. And I felt like everybody else was off limits. So anytime I met someone that was in the same boat as me, I clung onto them like a piece of saran wrap as if they were my one and only shot at love. I stayed in relationships that I knew weren't right for me. I talked myself out of what I actually wanted, and I told myself I was being realistic. But it wasn't realistic. It was settling, and deep down, I knew it. But what I eventually learned is that when you start making choices from the belief that your options are limited, you don't just settle in your relationships, you start abandoning yourself. After a diagnosis, something starts to happen that most people don't realize right away. You start making different choices about relationships and about what you think is even possible for you now. And it's not because you sat down one day and decided to want less for yourself. It's because what used to feel possible suddenly feels out of reach. Remember earlier when I told you this had a name? Well, it's called the Scarcity Trap. So, what is the Scarcity Trap? Well, it's the belief that because of your diagnosis, your options are limited and the list of people who'd accept you just got really short. So instead of holding out for the right person, you start taking whatever comes your way. You start telling yourself things like, I shouldn't be too picky now, or I can't accept the same things I wanted before. And those thoughts, they don't sound crazy. They actually start to sound very reasonable. But the more you repeat them, the more they convince you that better just isn't out there for you. Maybe you date someone you already know isn't right for you because you figure that's all you can get. Maybe you stay in a relationship way longer than you should just because that person accepted your diagnosis. You put up with the things you never would have tolerated before, and you talk yourself out of your own wants and needs, all because you want to be in a relationship so badly. There's real research behind why this happens. An economist named Sendil Mulalatin and psychologist named Aldar Shafir wrote a book called Scarcity, where they studied what the feeling of not having enough does to the brain. And what they found is that when you believe something is scarce, whether it's money, time, or in our case, options in love, your mind narrows in on the lack itself. It's called tunneling. You stop seeing the big picture and you start making short-term decisions just to hold on to whatever feels available right now. So if you've been grabbing on to the wrong people, this is why. It's not that you have bad judgment. It's just that scarcity actually changes the way you think. That's how the scarcity trap works. It convinces you that having someone is better than being single, even when that someone isn't right for you or treating you the way you want and deserve. And the moment you start believing your worth depends on being chosen, you stop choosing yourself. And that right there is where settling begins. Now, once that settling starts, the way you measure a relationship completely changes. Before your diagnosis, you probably had a list of things that mattered to you and a partner: how they treated you, how they made you feel, and whether you actually enjoyed being around them. But after a diagnosis, all of that takes a back seat to one single question: are they okay with my condition? And if the answer is yes, that feels like enough. It feels like you can actually breathe, like you got the green light to stop worrying about being rejected. So you grab onto that relief and you call it a connection. But do you know what that one question actually does? You stop paying attention to whether a person is actually good for you. You tolerate things that you never would have before. You push down your own needs just so you don't come across like you're asking for too much, and you make excuses for someone's bad behavior, telling yourself nobody's perfect and that you should just be grateful someone accepts you. And without even noticing, the bar for what you'll put up with keeps dropping lower and lower. Now, I've been there and I've done that. I can't even tell you how many times I've accepted less than I deserved and how many times I tolerated bad behavior just because someone accepted my diagnosis. And here's what I came to realize and what I want you to understand too. Acceptance isn't the same thing as being right for each other. Someone could be totally fine with your diagnosis and still make you feel invisible and unloved. They can totally accept you and still be completely wrong for you and the life that you want. Listen, being accepted is the bare minimum and should never be your goal, because when you build an entire relationship on the bare minimum, you end up putting up with things that wear you down a little more each day. That's what the scarcity trap does. It doesn't just talk you into lowering your standards. It also makes you think they didn't walk away, feel like you won the lottery. But you didn't win the lottery. All it did was let your diagnosis define your worth and settle for less than you deserve. Now, choosing from scarcity doesn't stop at your relationships. It changes how you see yourself. When you keep settling, you slowly stop trusting your own gut. Something feels off, and instead of listening to it, you explain it away. You tell yourself you're overreacting, or that you're asking for too much, or maybe that the problem is you. And every time you talk yourself out of what you know, that little voice inside your head gets harder and harder to hear. Then you start hiding parts of yourself just to avoid any friction. You don't speak up when something bothers you. You let things go that you shouldn't because you don't want to start a fight or lose what you have. And you convince yourself this is simply the trade-off. But somewhere underneath all that, you know that's a lie. One of my favorite authors and research professors, Brené Brown, spent over 2 decades studying worthiness, connection, and what makes people feel like they belong. One of the things she teaches is that true belonging never requires you to betray yourself. And one of the most important ways she explains this is through the difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in is when you change who you are so other people will like and accept you. Belonging is when you're accepted for exactly who you already are. And when you're caught in scarcity, you're not really belonging with anyone. You're bending yourself to fit in, hoping that if you keep quiet and go along with whatever they want, they won't leave. But that's not connection. Like I mentioned earlier, that is self-abandonment. And here's what self-abandonment actually feels like. You start feeling resentful, and you can't always explain why. You feel alone even when you're sitting right next to someone. You catch yourself wondering how you even ended up in a relationship that looks nothing like whatever you wanted. And the scariest part is how normal it all starts to feel. Not because any of it is good for you, but because you've gotten used to it. That's the real cost of choosing from scarcity. It doesn't blow up your life all at once. It just talks you into living with less, day after day, until less becomes the thing you expect. But this was never about your diagnosis lowering your worth. It's about believing that what you really want is no longer yours to have. When you stop choosing from scarcity, everything starts to turn around. You stop making choices to keep from being alone. You stop picking what's comfortable over what's actually right for you. And you stop treating someone's acceptance like it's the best you can hope for. Choosing yourself means you raise the bar back to where it always belonged. And you decide right there that settling is off the table for good. Earlier, I told you how I clung to the wrong people and settled just because I thought that was all I could get. But what I didn't tell you is what happened after I stopped believing that. The moment I decided my options were never actually limited, my entire world opened back up. It didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. I stopped hiding. I stopped apologizing for what I wanted, and I stopped lowering my standards just to be chosen. I started putting myself out there as who I am, take it or leave it. And here's what I found out. Everything I thought I lost was still out there waiting for me. Love, real connection, and a partner who doesn't have genital herpes, who chooses me every single day despite my condition. The reason I'm telling you this is because I don't want you to just hope that the same thing is possible for you. I want you to know it is. You don't have to stay somewhere that feels wrong just because that person is okay with your diagnosis. You don't have to close yourself off just to feel safe, and you don't have to talk yourself out of what you want just to protect yourself from being let down. Choosing yourself means you finally accept that you're allowed to want more and that you can actually have it. It means refusing to let your diagnosis decide what your life gets to look like. And it also means having the guts to be open, to be honest, and to keep being yourself until the right relationship finds you. That's how you break out of the scarcity trap, not by settling for less, but by choosing you over and over again. So here's what I want you to walk away with. Scarcity isn't something you choose on purpose. It's a belief that takes over after your diagnosis and convinces you your options are gone when they never were. It tricks you into thinking that being accepted is the most you can hope for, when acceptance is just the bare minimum. And the longer you settle for that, the more you start believing it's all you deserve. But your diagnosis doesn't get to decide what's possible for you. You do. The moment you stop choosing from scarcity and start choosing from the life you actually want, you start to see that everything you thought was off the table is still yours to have. Because there was never a shortage of love out there for you. There was only a limiting belief telling you there was. Well, that's all I have for today. And if you're tired of navigating your condition alone, come join us at Herpes Wellness. It's a private community where you can get support from people who actually get it, who don't judge it, and who can help you to navigate your condition so that you can start living the life that you want. So come check us out. The link is in the description. If you want support on the go, then you can always download the Herpes Wellness app for free in both the App Store and in Google Play. And if you're concerned about privacy, we've got you totally covered. The app icon and push notifications say H Wellness, so if someone happens to see your screen, you won't disclose your status unintentionally. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on audio, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Also, be sure to give us some love and give us a like or a hype, as this helps other people to find the podcast. And if you like what you're hearing, or there's something specific you'd like for me to talk about on the show, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you the next time on the Herpes Wellness Podcast. Bye for now.